Johannes Kepler created 3 laws that explain the motion of planets around our Sun. This video will only focus on the second law named the equal area in equal time law. In order to explain it, I will use this model over here. When Mars travels during a period of time, for example a month, it will travel a certain distance. That distance can be measured in order to obtain an arc, like this one. And that arc can be also measured in order to obtain an area. And that area will always be the same as long as it has occurred the same amount of time, in this case, a month. For example, this one, that is the arc when Mars is closest to the Sun, will have the same area as this one over here, when Mars is farthest from the Sun. Why do they have the same area? Well, this happens because when Mars is closest to the Sun, it travels faster, generates a larger arc compared to the one is farther, that moves slower and generates a smaller arc.
The Kepler's first law is called the law of planetary motion. This law established the movement of the planets around the Sun. This law was created by the scientific Johannes Kepler on the year 1609 after Christ. This is the most famous law of Johannes Kepler because it's the law that established how the planets move around the Sun and its in turn. This law was also established by other scientists, but Johannes Kepler made it right. The law of planetary motion was the first Kepler law by Johannes Kepler on the year 1609 after Christ.
Kepler's third law. Kepler discovered that the size of the planet's orbit is simply related to the sidereal period of the orbit. If the size of the orbit A is expressed in astronomical units and the period P is measured in years, then Kepler's third law says that the square of the period is proportional to the cube of the semi-major axis of the orbit. After applying Newton's law of motion and Newton's law of gravity, we find that Kepler's third law takes a more general form, where time period square equals 4 times pi squared times the cube of the semi-major axis divided by gravitational constant times m1 plus m2, where m1 and m2 are the masses of the two orbiting objects in solar masses.
The Moon has existed for more than 4.5 billion years, and during this time the Moon has been orbiting the Earth in a choreographed circular dance. But what dictates this relationship? Sir Isaac Newton mathematically modeled this relationship, and it's called Newton's universal law of gravitation. The universal law of gravitation constant times the mass of each object divided by the square of the distance between two objects. G represents the universal gravitational constant. M1 and M2 are the masses of the objects. R is a straight line between the center of two objects.
In today's TikTok, we will see Newton's third law of motion. Isaac Newton was an English mathematician. He did some laws. These laws were about motion, and they were called laws of motion. Supernal. Third law of motion, the law of action and reaction. So in this law it stated that whenever a force occurs, this will always happen. What you may be wondering, what does this even mean? Well, what this means is that there is no way a force activate itself, because this will always generate an equal and opposite force. So whenever you get to talk about Newton's third law of motion, always remember to take into account these things. Forces outpace in pair, forces are exerted and received by the bodies involved, they do not only follow each other. So to finalize, here is what Newton concluded when postulating this law. To every force of action, there corresponds another equal force in the opposite direction called reaction. Here is a photo of me appearing in the video.